does that even mean, Boardgame corner?
Ahoy there, YouTube! I'm back again today for another game review. Today I'm very excited to check out Stupid Deaths from University Games. This is for 2 to 6 players, ages 12 plus. It'll take about 10 to 20 minutes to play. And in Stupid Deaths, you are going to be given a death each and every round. Someone is going to read out a death card about how someone has died in an odd or a stupid way. And then everyone else who didn't read the card is going to try to decide if that was true or false by secretly laying down a true or false card. If you're correct, you get to move forward 1 space, getting closer to oh-so-elusive victory. But if you're incorrect, then the Grim Reaper will move 1 space closer to you and everyone else, trying to kill you. But luckily, you do have 1 extra life token, but after that, you can be eliminated from the game. It's a light, simple, trivia-esque style game. It's kind of trivia because it's about, how people died. But let's open it up. I'll show it to you, and I'll give you my thoughts. Alright then, we're taking a look at what you're going to get inside of Stupid Deaths. So first and foremost, we have our handy-dandy rule book. It's just this right here. This is just an advertisement. That's just, the front of the box. It shows you what the game is. So this is what you got right here, and overall, it's well done. I will say I think we had 1 or maybe 2 questions that aren't answered in here. You kind of have to house rule, and they're minor stuff, like what happens if everybody dies at the same time. I'm assuming everybody loses. Honestly, this is the kind of game where you're not really going to care for the most part, because it's such a light, simple game, but still would be nice. But overall, it should have you up and running in no time at all. So in Stupid Deaths, you each are going to get one of these pawns. You'll start on the green spot, and your goal is to make it, bam, all the way to the red spot up there. If you're the first person to do that, then you immediately win the game. You're going to do that by predicting whether or not how someone died is true or false. If it is, you're correct in either being true or false, you get to move forward 1 space. If it's wrong, then the Grim Reaper gets to move forward 1 space for you and 1 space for everyone else who got it wrong, which means if you're playing at the higher player counts, the Grim Reaper can move pretty dang fast. He's going to start all the way at the top right here in the red, and it's just a little simple standee right here that pops right in there. So let's show you exactly how the game is worked. I have a 3-player game set up right here. So one person is always going to be the person who just reads the card. They're not actively involved in guessing whether or not it's true or false because you'll see in a second, it's on the card. So Pier Paolo Pasolini, born 1922, died 1975. A celebrated director and writer, Pasolini was murdered, run over several times by his own car. A young man admitted the killing, but retracted almost 30 years later. He claimed to have only confessed because his family had been threatened. Gangsters were suspected, and the case was reopened, but it was never been solved. So this is how someone died. And now everyone else, aside from the person who read the card, is going to guess whether or not this is true or false. So let's go ahead. I'll put these ones out right here. And they both guessed true, which means they both get to move forward 1 space. So red and yellow move forward 1 space, and boom, you move on to the next one, and now this guy would read the card. But let's pretend that someone actually put false instead. So we have 1 true, and we have 1 false. Well, the red person who got it correct would still move forward 1, but the yellow person would stay there, and now, bam, the Grim Reaper would move ahead 1 space. Now let's see what would happen if both people answered false. If both people answered false and it was true, that rewards the person who read the card because I guess they read the card well or something. So the yellow person who read the card would get to move forward 2 spaces, and it's always going to be 2 spaces no matter the player count. So even if you're playing a 5-player game, you still move forward 2 spaces. And the Grim Reaper would now move forward 1 space for red getting it wrong and 1 space for orange getting it wrong. Now, what will happen eventually is the Grim Reaper can catch you. And what happens is when the Grim Reaper catches you, you are out of the game unless you spend your extra life token. If you spend your extra life token, you lose it, and then you go 1 space in front of the Grim Reaper. But the next time the Grim Reaper catches you, you are eliminated from the game. So you're going to take turns going around the table, reading off the cards, and then guessing whether or not they are true or false. Everyone else will do it. And the first person to get to hear will win the game. Also, you could win by being the last person alive. So let's say that red and orange had to use that, and then this happens, and then the Grim Reaper moves forward too. Bam, bam. Red would now not have their extra life, which means they'd be eliminated, and yellow would win the game. But anywho, that in a nutshell is how you're going to play Stupid Deaths. Alright then, stupid deaths from University Games. What are my final thoughts? Let's go over the pros, let's go over the cons. First, on the con side, game's not going to be for everybody for a variety of different reasons. First and foremost, 2 to 6 players is a great player count, but it plays drastically different at 2 players as opposed to 6 players. At 6 players, it's always going to be who's the last person left alive. Just every single time, that's what it's going to boil down to, a player elimination game. Whereas a 2-player game, it's a race to get to the top. And I'll talk more about that in a couple minutes, but just need to know that that's because of really, really poor game design. And I'll tell you about that later. Component-wise, none of the components are going to wow you at all. They're chintzy, they feel cheap, and it looks like they were trying to get the price down as low as they possibly could, which I understand, especially with a mass market style game like this, but it's to the point where it just feels cheap. The cards feel very thin and bendy, and the kind of thing where like you're gonna ruin a card here or there, which is not something that you want, obviously. And you know the pawns, they're very generic pawns. The Grim Reaper looks kind of cool, but everything about this game it doesn't feel up to par with hobby games nowadays. Now that being said, take that with a caveat, because this is aimed at more of the mass market crowd, but still, it just doesn't feel good enough. It feels like the kind of thing where it would have been good enough in the early 90s, but now, the components aren't good enough. And the cards are also jagged edge. Hate those cards. But anywho, you're not going to be shuffling the cards that much, so it's not a huge deal, but something that I did want to mention. Continuing on with the cons, the game definitely feels like they just took the idea of the stupid deaths, which is a cool idea. Most people like learning interesting ways people died, and then tried to make a game around it, but it feels like they put 85% of the effort into finding all these cool, unique cards about death, and then 15% into the game design, and the game is very samey, it's very lackluster, and there's a lot of issues I got it with. So let's just get to the game design, and the poor game design of this. And it just feels so lazy, and I'm not going to give them a pass at all for this, because here's the thing. I honestly feel like this was play tested 3 or 4 times in your local friendly game shop. People would have given them suggestions. Easy to add suggestions that would make this game better. Immediately make it better. And they're just not in this game. So first and foremost, and the biggest one by far, is how the Grim Reaper works. He starts on the red spot on the top, and he's trying to get you. You start on the green spot on the bottom. It's 12 spaces in between the red spot and the green spot, which means if you're playing a 2 or 3 player game, for the most part, especially a 2-player game, you never have to worry about the Grim Reaper. In a 2-player game, he's going to move 1 spot, potentially a turn. That's not much. It's not a threat. It's just a race at that point. But in a 6-player game, and I played this once, 6 players, it's a player elimination game, straight out, because, you know, he's going to be moving 2, 3, 4, potentially 5 spaces if everybody gets it wrong, each and every turn, and it just becomes who's going to be the last one left alive. But therein lies another problem where the rule booklet doesn't really tell you what happens if 2 people die at the same time because they're on the same space, and they're the last 2 people. So I just assume everybody loses the game, but you kind of already lose the game by playing the game because it's not a great game. It's not a good game, even. Also, game design-wise, I don't like the fact that someone has to be out each round. And this is especially glaring at the lower player counts. If you're playing 2 players, it's like you're just reading one other person the question. You know, and there's an easy solution for this. Just put the true or false really small down here, and maybe mark on the other side. This is where you need to put your thumb so that you cover the true or false, and then read the card. And then you lay down your own card, and then you move your thumb, and bam, true or false. And now everybody's actively engaged. One person is not just sitting there reading a card and then waiting. How hard is that? I know how hard it is because I've designed a game before. Not bragging, I'm just saying, I know. It's not hard. It's a small graphical design thing you can do on the front and the back, and they just chose not to do it. Same with fixing the Grim Reaper. And many, many, thousands of games have done this. You know what you do? You put, all right, this is where the Grim Reaper starts at 2 players. This is where the Grim Reaper starts at 3 players, 4 players, 5 players, 6 players. They could have easily done that, but they didn't do it. And it's lazy and inexcusable. And honestly, it's what I've come to expect from University Games, which stinks. Because I would love it if they started sending me great games. Or I started picking them up, they're great games. But they're not. And this is no exception. But moving on to the pros, the theme is cool. Most people are... Oh, and that's the last con I have of this game. It's all about death. Death, 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 death. And it is kind of making light about people who have died, which is not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I personally don't mind it, but it's a game about death, which will be a turnoff to some people. Continuing on to the pros. The theme, I like the theme, and I like learning about how people have died and the interesting ways people have died, and then trying to guess that. The actual, what you're doing in the game is fun. And as a mass market game, I think some people will have fun with this game. And as a mass market game, I can almost give this game a pass. As a hobby game, absolutely not. No. There's just not enough meat on the bones here. But continuing on to the pros, it's interesting to learn about the different way people have died. The gameplay is functional. It's not a broken game by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a short and sweet game. It's easy to learn, easy to teach, always a good thing. The box is appealing, and it has some table appeal because people will be listening and they'll be interested, to know if things are true or false. So it's, kind of easy to lure them in. You could house rule stuff. I mean, what we started doing the last game was just making sure your thumb covered the whole bottom part so that way everybody could get in. That's another comment I have with the game. The fact that... So if you're the reader and everybody gets it wrong, you get to move forward 2 spaces, which in a 6-player game hardly ever happens. And in a 2-player game, it happens literally 50% of the time. Once again, just poor balancing. God, the more I talk about this game, the lower the score goes. So I'm just going to wrap it up. Stupid Deaths, the frightfully funny game. And I feel like, actually, a kid in my class said this, which was the best part. We got done playing the game, and she was looking at the box, and she was like, that's not a scary game, and it's not a funny game. That's not a very good thing to put on the box. And I was like, yeah, you're right. It's not scary. It's not funny. It's not that much fun. It's not a good game. It's okay to mediocre at best. And unfortunately, all these really cool deaths are wasted on this game. So Stupid Deaths, a frightfully funny game. No, not one I can recommend. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to click on that subscribe button down below in the comments below. Let me know, when's the last time you were touched by death in any way, shape, or form? For me personally, it was about a couple weeks ago. This woman that I knew, she ended up dying. Her husband killed her. And I used to try and hit on her a lot when we'd go out to the bars. And she knew my cousin a lot, which is why I was able to hit on her a lot. But she never gave me the time of day because I actually slept with one of her friends, who's this really, really, really big girl named Corrine. And she just always held that against me. She was just like, yeah, no. You're just out here trying to get some. I mean, which was true. I mean, she wasn't wrong. But yeah, that's the last time. And it was terrible, terrible thing. Like, she had 2 kids, and her ex-husband just, yeah. Terrible world. But yeah, there you go. When's the last time have you been touched by death? And as always, thanks for your time, YouTube.